Welcome to Keto Life Support, where we make your keto life sustainable, fun, and low stress. I'm Kim Howerton, and I'll be coming to you weekly with some of my keto besties to bring you the practical, real-world keto advice that you need. Quick disclaimer, I am not a doctor, and even if we do have a doctor in the house from time to time, he or she is not your doctor, and nothing we say on this show should be taken as medical advice. Always check in with a trusted medical professional about your own personal medical concerns.
Hello, this is Kim Howerton with Keto Life Support. This is episode number 165. And on today's episode, we're talking about keto versus satiety. So I got this question from one of my subscribers who was asking, what did I think about keto versus satiety was specifically the question. And then I dug in a little deeper. And I think what they were referring to was kind of what's gone on with the Diet Doctor website over the past few months, years, I don't know, a while. So I'll catch you up from my perspective. I don't work for Diet Doctor. I don't work with Diet Doctor. They seem like good people. I have no inside scoop whatsoever. But from my perspective, what I've seen happen in the Diet Doctor arena. So if you're not familiar, Diet Doctor is one of the top, I think, websites. See, I've done no research. One of the top websites on the low-carb keto diet. And it was started by Dr. Andreas Eenfeldt, and it is very popular and for years was a great resource around keto and low carb eating. It's a member, you get you could do like the free version or a membership, which I think is still like under $10 maybe, at least not much more if it's any more. And it's got a lot of recipes, information, videos, that kind of stuff. So it's an inexpensive resource. Do I agree with everything about it? No. Is it like everything I would say verbatim? No. Is it pretty darn good? Absolutely. Is it not perfect because it doesn't agree with me 100% and I am the ruler of the universe? Only according to me. You know, that's just a personal thing, right? So good resource with good recipes, good information. Again, like it's not everything I think, but it's a lot of good basics. But over time, I noticed that Andreas, who I've seen speak at many conventions, like, what did I see in the background? And again, I don't work for them. I'm not like actually in the background, but I see like people at conventions. I see who they pull into their arena. And I noticed they started collaborating with somebody named Ted Naiman. And Ted is a medical doctor out of the Seattle area. And he is a big proponent of something that he has termed, I don't know that it's his term specifically, but he definitely uses this term, P to E ratio, protein to energy ratio. And he, in fact, has a book about that specifically. And Ted is big into this concept of higher protein eating and eating to satiety, but basing your food choices on the protein to energy ratio. And he's developed these ratios. Basically protein to everything else. So calories from protein to calories from carbs and fats. And so Ted is very much someone who talks about satiety and believing in a high protein diet as a higher satiety diet. And so as I saw Ted coming into the Diet Doctor sphere and seeing Andreas talking about this at conventions, and Diet Doctor, like I said, I don't remember if it was years or months ago, but a little while ago, started shifting and recommending this higher protein, not so high fat approach. And woo boy, howdy, was there some outcry from the peoples. Twitter was all a Twitter about it. And there was anger, there was finger pointing, there was just general upsetness. And so there was a little bit of this back and forth, and Diet Doctor, it felt like, was a little bit caught in the middle. Like they were like mid shift. They were like half butterfly, half caterpillar, and they're like, oh, we don't know what we are. And so it got a little confusing for people. So anyway, just this last week, Diet Doctor came out and said, hey, they understand that was confusing to people. No one likes change. And so what they're doing is they're pulling Diet Doctor back to just being keto and low carb, not just keto, but keto and low carb. And then, as they always have been. And then they're going to start to develop a second brand called, I believe, Hava, Hava, which is going to focus on this other style of eating that seems to be referred to as high-satiety eating, which is, I would say, as a more general description, higher protein, lower fat, moderate carb, whole food kind of eating. So as a concept, I support that. And so somebody was asking, what do you think about these two approaches? And I think if anyone's been paying attention, you might have noticed that actually Hava, at least in the general sense, would explain a little bit more about how I eat these days and have eaten for the past 2+ years. So I focus on, for my own diet, the protein to energy ratio, like Ted Naiman does, but with a lot of self-tinkering that means that I know what foods work best for me. And I do indeed focus on satiety. Now, the part that I'm not fully in alignment with, although I get it. Like Diet Doctor was playing with some sort of algorithm, I think, where foods were given a score of where they score on this satiety index, where certain foods are more satiating and other foods are less satiating. And the way they do this usually is satiety per calorie. And so that way, if you think about anything, hello, welcome to math class. So when we say anything is X per Y, you can envision a division problem. So X per Y. So when we say per, satiety per calorie. If you think about that mathematically a little bit, the higher the calories are, the lower the score will be, right? Just like a division problem where if you have a number on the bottom of your division problem, your divisor is a bigger number, you have a smaller piece. Just like you could say, right, 1/4 is a bigger pie piece than 1/8 is, even though there's one on the top of both of them, right? The divisor, the number on the bottom is bigger, which means it's a smaller piece, right? And so when we talk about satiety per calorie, when any food has higher calories, it's going to have a lower satiety score because satiety score is based on satiety per calorie. And this can get a little bit, on its surface, it makes total sense. But if we base all our food decisions based on the score, like broccoli has a very low caloric intake compared to steak. But if we base all our decision on satiety per calorie, the fact that the broccoli has such low calories, broccoli is always going to win. But you don't want to eat a diet that's just broccoli, right? So this gets a little confusing on a podcast, I understand. But for me, I 100% agree with the concept of seeking the diet that gives you the best satiety. And I also agree that calories matter and you have to stay within your budget. But I also believe that we shouldn't just be building a daily food intake around how to eat the most food for the least calories, right? It's not just about volume. It's a little bit about volume, but not only. So for me, if I include a little bit of red meat or a lot of red meat, but some red meat in my meal, I find that meal much more satisfying than if I have that meal without any red meat in it. But it doesn't score better than other choices. Chicken, I think, scores better than beef on satiety per calorie. And yet, I find beef more satisfying. So conceptually, I 100% think we should eat a diet that we find ultimately as satisfying as possible. And if more resources like this new site they're developing helps you gain some strategies for eating in a way that you find most satiating, then I support it. However, on a lot of these scales, keto ends up looking really badly because it is fairly calorically dense in what you eat. You might notice, your food would fit on a salad plate rather than a giant dinner plate because vegetables and grains and things might take up a lot more room per calorie. And so I think it's a mistake to only look at satiety per calorie. And so when people ask me, what do you think is the better option, keto or this approach of PE or satiety per calorie, I say it's an individual navigation for each person. What is the style of eating where you feel happiest, healthiest, and most satisfied yourself? And you're achieving your weight loss goals if you have weight loss goals or your body composition goals. You should have some body composition goals. So in summary, I think that they're both good things that we should learn about. We should be learning about low carb, keto, and high satiety eating. They're not opposites. They're along the same spectrum. I think keto is fabulous. And for a lot of people, keto is the most satiating way of eating at the end of the day. It's well known as a very satiating eating style. I stopped eating 100% keto when it stopped being the most satiating way of eating. When I found, and I've done episodes on this in the past, why did I start eating more vegetables? I found I was more satiated at a lower caloric number when I added more vegetables in. That was not always true. When I started my keto journey, I did not get the same level of satiety from adding more vegetables. I actually felt more satiated with less vegetables. So I went from keto was more satiating to higher protein, lower fat, higher carb, not high carb, but higher than it used to be carb, still low carb, was the most satiating approach for me. And even now I find, right, that if I include very many products, highly processed foods, keto treats, energy dense foods, I'm less satiated. I'll eat like sometimes a keto treat, a packaged keto treat, and I'm like, wow, I'm no fuller than before. That for me, that's a very low satiety food, even if it says keto on the name, right? It's how does this particular food fill me up, make me feel, and make me interact with my food choices throughout the day. So conceptually, 100% satiety is the number one thing we should look at. However, also, your satiety scale doesn't look like anybody else's satiety scale. We can use averages, figures, algorithms, scores to maybe inform us about, on average, what it might look like. But we always have to factor in our own preferences, our own leanings, our own tendencies, and find what works for us. Because, there is no one size fits all. I think if there's one thing I can know for 100% certain, there is no one size fits all. And so we have to find our own path. So certainly delve into the concept of high satiety eating, learn some stuff. You will probably help yourself on the journey, but please don't trade one hardcore dogma for another. In every camp, there are people who are going to tell you that the other camp is stupid. This is what's wrong with camps, right? That in keto, we get defensive and we say, no, they're wrong. They tell you that protein is more satiating, but it's not. And then in the protein, satiety camp, protein is the most satiating macronutrient. It's anyone who doesn't think it's stupid, right? And it's like, please, people, let's just get along and find what works for you. There are things to learn from each group as long as you don't get stuck in the dogma. All right. So that's what I think about keto and low carb versus, quote, high satiety. I think that we should always seek out satiety as a concept, but don't fall for little gimmicks that don't actually seem like they apply to you. All right, people, that's the lesson for this week. I hope you're well. I'll talk to you soon.
Thank you so much for joining us for this episode of Keto Life Support. Want more information? Want show notes? Want to suggest a topic? Just head over to ketolifesupport.com. That's where all that kind of thing can go on. By the way, I have a request. If you could go to your podcast host and hit subscribe, we would really, really appreciate it. And what would be even more awesome is if you could write a review. And what would be even more awesome than that is if you could write like a really flattering review. Just asking, you do you. All right. So thanks so much for joining us. I'm thrilled that you're part of the Keto fam. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.